past noon. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Manoj Ramnani. I'm the founder and the CEO of SalesIntel. SalesIntel, where we provide the pipeline generation platform that helps go-to-market teams not only build pipeline but convert that into revenue. Today, I am excited to host with amazing panelists with me this webinar where we will dive deeper into some of the concepts of data-driven pipeline cultivation. And the word cultivation is new. We chose it because many times you see pipeline gets generated, but it never converts into revenue. So the goal here is let's focus on some of the key aspects of generating pipeline that ultimately converts into revenue. So I'm excited. And with that, let's get started with the introduction of this amazing panelist that we have. Kristen, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Koenig. I'm the GM of our video solutions at RingCentral, which includes meetings, webinars, and events. And very excited to be here and talk about go-to-market pipeline. It's near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to join these panelists here today since they have such fresh ideas.
That's great. Thanks, Kristen. Welcome. Ruchika.
Hi, I'm Ruchika Chopra. I run sales operations at Illumio. Illumio is a cybersecurity company that leads the zero trust segmentation to protect networks and secure cloud environments. I've been part of Illumio for the last 2.5 years. My mission has really been enabling growth and at the same time delivering, simplicity and scale for the go-to-market teams. Prior to that, I've been very focused on building, scaling, optimizing across different go-to-market teams, go-to-market functions, very varied experience. So I've done the early stage startups all the way to public companies, diverse verticals from storage to networking to now security. So definitely have kept myself, constantly learning and being engaged. Super excited to be here. A big thank you to SalesIntel, for hosting and gathering us together for this webinar. Pipeline clearly continues to be one of, top priorities for 2025. And so I'm excited to be here to talk about, this topic with a lot of like-minded peers.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Ruchika. Welcome. Tiffany.
Hi, everybody. My name's Tiffany Gonzalez. I am a LP, a limited partner at Stage 2 Capital. I am also currently at a small company nobody knows called Microsoft.
So what do you guys do?
Right. I know, right? Nobody knows. But I'm in the business applications area of the business, which includes, Power Platform and Dynamics, all the low code, no code biz app space. Before that, I was also GM of an e-commerce company in South Korea for multiple years and run up to IPO. And so I love this mastering a data-driven pipeline. I will delightfully call myself a data nerd. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. Welcome. David.
Hi, my name is David Reich. And like Tiffany, I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. I'm a data geek. However, my title, I actually carry multiple titles. Currently full-time, I'm working for IBM as a customer success manager, but I'm also what they call IBM's chief magic officer because I am a magician. And that's what I've been doing for years. And, so you're saying, why does that matter? What matters is communication. By the way, shameless plug, if you want any kind of free information about anything I talk about, my URL's up there, davidreich.com/tactical communication. I love sending out all kinds of great stuff. What I love doing is I'm a geek who loves people. And when we talk about pipeline and ultimately we're talking about sales, right? Sales is about people. People's about relationships and communication. And my focus is on how do we get the information from people to go figure out what our ideal client is and use the data and use that information to do that. What pays the bills every day? I am in charge of IBM's data and AI portfolio for some of the largest customers. And we take a look from these unique perspectives to not just focus on the data, but how we're getting that data and what people are doing with that data and how we find the data to put in there because you put in lousy data, you get lousy information out. So that's my focus. I have a lot of fun with that stuff. So thank you.
This is great. Well, it's a perfect transition to our first question. Let's just dive right from the data side. And you mentioned two things, David, data and ICP. So why don't we start with there, right? Generating pipeline, we at SalesIntel say it's a team sport. You can't just give it to PDR, can't give it to AEs. And it truly takes a village to come together to build a pipeline that ultimately converts into revenue. But the village has to be directed right in the right direction, and that's where the strategy comes in. That's where the ICP definition comes in. How do you define or refine if the ICP is already defined? How do you keep refining this ICP, and why do we think ICP definition is important to generate a pipeline that ultimately converts into revenue?
So it's a great question, and the thing that I really look at, going back to what I was just saying, everything's all about people making decisions. And we talk about ICP and mostly the ideal client customer profile. What does that really mean? And what a lot of us do, and we all fall into this, is, oh, I know who my ideal customer is, until you realize you don't. And a lot of that has to do with going to figure out where you want to go, what kind of people you want to talk to, and then essentially do a bunch of interviews of people in industry, people in your organization, your executives, your business directors, competitors, partners, and just ask some open-ended questions. What kind of people are buying these types of things? And just talk to me and just ask some of these questions and then be quiet and take a bunch of notes and help you refine what is your ideal client profile, because you put in, a couple of wrong assumptions. Let's face it, AI, like I said, I'm a humanist, but I'm also a data geek. And I worked on the original IBM Jeopardy project, which was absolutely hysterical with some of the answers that it was coming out with early in the stages of training. And you put in a couple of small pieces of bad data into your model, and who knows what's going to start popping out of this, and it's going to take you in the wrong direction. So the first thing is figuring out who that ideal client is before you start going into the data, before you start going into the tools. Asking those questions and talking to everybody. And believe it or not, your competitors are going to be very happy to talk to you about this, because guess what? You're going to share that information with them. And there's plenty of customers out there. And by finding out that information, then you can start figuring out what you want to do with that ideal client profile, putting it into models, starting to build that. So that's the first thing I do. I don't want to monopolize all the time for this question and give some people a chance to comment or say, Dave, you're nuts.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. I love what you're saying, David. I think one of the biggest things is to really understand that an ICP is not a marketing persona. It's not a marketing framework. It's not a very broad cohort of, I look at the Shark Tank, right? Everybody that goes in there and says, all of my customers or anybody under 30 who breathes, and they get eviscerated, right? That is not an ICP. Right. An ICP is really, at least from my perspective, is when you start to understand who are your customers specifically that are not only the leading indicators of retention, but are those that are joining your business and those that are staying with your business and the behaviors that are causing those individuals to stay. Once you have an idea behind that, then what you can do is you really start to hone in, and you can even categorize your segmentation and your cohort analyses into red, yellow, green based on their leading indicators of retention, which really helps you nail into the ICP in a very specific way, right? It helps us understand that there's a ton of other customers, but this is very specifically what the profile of that customer is.
Yeah, there's one thing. I'm sorry. There's one thing also that you mentioned that popped into my head. Said I can't believe I didn't say this. And I bring this to light also as a performer, because I do shows and lectures and stuff like that. And we're talking about customers. Okay, there's customers, clients, audiences, and there's a big difference between the customer, the person who's going to use the product, the people whose day-to-day problems you're solving, and the people who are going to be those decision makers. And the ideal client profile, who are we targeting with this? Are we targeting the people who are going to say, I want to do this every day, or I want my teams to do this, or I have the ability to sign the check? Who are we actually going after? And that's a very important distinction in the entire pipeline process.
Yeah, and so I'll jump in with my operational lens here. Like, I think, David, you segued perfectly into, like, when you talk about who, it's the whole personas, you start talking about persona matrix. But like, to tee off on what Tiffany said, very strong indications with fit, which is based on, like you said, by whether they're a strong, moderate, or a weak fit, depending on what the retention is, and a ton of historical indicators. But also, what's really important is intent. We keep hearing about, the figuring out where the buyer journey is, where the customer is in the buying journey, because it could be everything from, are they really ready to make a purchase, or are they still in a consideration and an awareness part of the buyer journey? And so, looking at both fit as well as intent, we actually then end up putting them in a 9-box and almost tiering your accounts and building a go-to-market strategy based on those tiers. So it's like, if you're tier 1, those are the ones that are ripe for a very cohesive go-to-market strategy. Like, take the village with you, whether it's the ADR team, whether it's the AE team, the account team, and really actively prospect into your tier 1 accounts. Tier 2 is probably much more of an outbounding exercise, and tier 3 is like much more of like a marketing effort where you end up nurturing those accounts. So it is definitely about the data, the fit, the intent, but then how do you build a strategy around those accounts? And then I think Manoj's initial question is like, how do you refine and iterate, which is then again based on feedback, based on what you're hearing, based on data. Like, we end up looking at conversion rates across those different tiers. We end up looking at days to close across those different tiers, and making sure that the way we're doing it actually makes sense. Like, do we need to go in and reiterate and refine based on the results that we're seeing? So it's an entire like closed loop, cycle.
I want to comment on that, Ruchika, because I think you make an excellent point about the refinement process. Separate from my day-to-day job, I actually consult startups. So I know in the chat, Moyne said any tips to pioneer a new product. And I think it's super important to really break it down into those demographics and where those pain points solve. I'll give you 2 examples, one in my day-to-day job and then one for the consulting. I had a startup who said, my product is a fit for everyone. And when we looked at the data and what the pain point solved for, he was going after the shiny objects. He had Google interested in all these big tech companies, and they're like, wow, this is really going to accelerate my product. But when you look at it, enterprises take a lot of work. Sometimes they can derail your product roadmap. So when you take a step back, are they really the right time for you? They could be a long-term perfect customer. But I think you need to look at the demographics in a deep way when you think about, okay, what are the demographics? What are the firmographics, which someone just pointed out, revenue? And then what is the actual behaviors of people that can buy and not churn? The second example I'll give is my current company. So I came from Hopin. We got acquired by RingCentral. When I took over the business about a year ago, I looked at where's our churn happening? Like, where's the business churn? And I noticed that a lot of our customers that were churning had one event a year. So from an ICP perspective, are we going to target those people? Should my sales team actually sell that product to those customers? And the answer is yes. From a e-commerce and self-service and PLG model, they could be great. But from a sales-led motion, we're going to go for the reoccurring business. So I think it's really important, to Ruchika's point and Tiffany and David, to like kind of, put this with a bow, is like, it's really about refining and understanding what's the reoccurring and what's those demographics, the firmographics, which is like company size, revenue, and then the behaviors of all these different individuals, and keep iterating so that your business becomes healthier.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. Uh, refining those ICP based on not just your firmographic and demographic data, but from the renewal side. Because if you can't renew a customer, then that's not a SaaS business, right?
Correct.
And as they say, retention is a new acquisition in the world that we are living in. Absolutely agree with you. So Ruchika, you mentioned that you refine your ICP looking at the data that comes to you. So Kristen, as you, how often do you refine this data? And if you take a step back of measurement of, you define your ICP and you put your village, if you will, in motion, to go, build this pipeline. And now it's time to come refining. We are in February, looking at the data from last year to see what worked, what didn't work. So let's start in a quick discussion on this topic as to what is the measurement framework and how often do we refine this ICP?
I can take that. So, like Manoj, you kicked this off, right? The goal is, when you talk about pipeline cultivation, like the goal is to actually build predictable pipeline. And so, I mean, I think the key word here is like predictable, but it actually always just starts with getting clarity around definitions. Before we can even go into measurement, what I find is that there's so many, like similar to Kristen's background, I've been at so many different like startups as well as public companies. And it's everybody, has to this day different measurements and different understanding of what's an MQL versus what's a sales qualified lead versus what is a stage 2 opportunity, and even across like what's marketing bringing to us. I mean, you could go down a rat hole with just attribution, right? That's everybody's
Or the
favorite.
first touch and the last touch.
Yes, exactly. So it's and so I think the biggest, before we can even get into a framework, it's really about like defining a set of KPIs. And just within that, it's all about aligning, enabling, communication, and establishing that. So, like at Illumio, we actually ended up setting up a data dictionary to begin with for just our KPIs. And then in terms of when do you do it, or when do you have the ability to both measure and refine, it's constant. And it really depends then on what do you want to measure on a weekly basis versus what do you want to measure on a monthly basis, and then on a quarterly basis. And so it's really establishing those cadences, because for example, like on a weekly basis, we are really like doubling down as a senior leadership team on a lot of top of funnel KPIs, on a lot of pipeline generation, on pipeline progression. On a monthly basis, we run regional pipeline councils. We're sitting down with every single region and really honing in on maybe their trouble spots, or trying to figure out, how do we do things better? And then on a quarterly basis is where you end up getting into conversions, when you end up looking at your ICPs, when you start looking at slipped deals, and you start doing a lot of the analysis in terms of close lost. And so I think it's all about being extremely consistent, bringing in that inspection into your process, into your day-to-day like rhythm of the business. And once you have that framework, that's when you can actually trust the data, you can trust the historicals to go and build your models for the future. But till you have that framework, till you have the alignment, you don't have the inspection, I wouldn't trust the data then to go and build any kind of models for the future.
Yes, I like it. I like your cadence of weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then I'm assuming the full cycle comes at the end of the year, right? Where you look at your close one, you look at your renewals, and then define a strategy for the following or the upcoming year.
100%. And that's what goes into then, like, when you're building all of the models, the pipeline models, as an example, for next year, you could do it. We do it like a top-down model and a bottoms-up model. And so you look at both in terms of what were our average deal sizes, and where was the pipeline coming from, to the extent where you can look at what is your inside sales team contributing versus what your channel team is bringing in, and almost bring a top-down, a bottoms-up model. And at the same time, you could do a top-down model, which is like, what are my sales targets? What are my conversions? How does that translate into pipeline? Make assumptions on slippage, make assumptions on erosion, And that can also then make sure that you're actually doing the right things between a bottoms up and a top down.
And I'll piggyback off of that, Ruchika, too, because I think across the board, when I've looked at channels, you have like the sales-led channel, the channel, which is your partnerships, and then you have the marketing-led channel across pipeline generation. You really have 3 buckets. There could be more, but there's 3 kind of main buckets that you look at. I'm going to look at the marketing lens for a second, because we talked about this earlier when all of us like met, and I'm like really passionate about it. So what's funny is last year, when we were acquired, we had basically what can work with pipeline. And this year, when I went into annual planning and budgeting season, and I looked at all the categories that actually created the most pipeline. Sometimes people can say, let's rinse and repeat, and let's put more money in certain areas, right? But when we actually looked at it, and I see actually some of my team members in the chat, which they'll see, we said, what are the actual channels that are performing? And you look at the money you spent on that channel, whether it's, content-led growth, like content syndication or paid social or search engine optimization, and you move money into those areas. Do not spray and pray, because if you spray and pray, that doesn't help with the consistency of where you're going to get your pipeline. So we actually moved money, took it out of the buckets that are making a little bit less, and you don't have to be everywhere where your competitors are. You just have to be in the right place at the right time to get those qualified leads. And so by moving those into the right buckets, we can actually focus in our pipeline on 3 things, which is what our strategy is for this year. It's like content syndication, search engine optimization, and really community. So when you think about those things, there's sub initiatives in there, but I think the measurement of that from the last year is super important. And then you can actually get the cost per pipe, so you can put the right budget in the right categories.
Yeah. Last year, Christine, last year I had 100 go-to-market leaders come on my podcast, and we talked about pipeline. How do you generate pipeline? One of the core areas where we focused on was I gave them 100 pennies. And we came up with 10, growth models. Your sales-led, your marketing-led, your community-led, your partnership-led, right? Your product-led growth, your CEO, your founder-led growth. And I asked them to allocate those pennies to the channels that they have. It was fascinating to see, how these 2 go-to-market leaders were putting their pennies. I'm inviting them again for series 2 to reflect on where they put their 100 pennies last year versus where they are putting pennies. So to that, I would love to get your pennies. Like, what are your channels in practical life where you are putting your pennies for 2025? So, Kristen, you can go first, or David.
What? So I think for me, I think channels are changing, and we need to see the new demographics coming up in the workforce. And I see every company making mistakes on this. I think video communications, I know I'm in the video space, so I have to say that, but that's not true. I do think the new demographics coming up in the workforce, they want passion, and they have mission-driven initiatives to buy products from, people that they appreciate where the mission is going and the product works for their business. So I think community-led growth is going to be a big factor moving forward into the year. I know me and Jason and Manoj, we've talked about that. Community-led growth, which is equal to content. So content syndication, which is how you repurpose that content and create that all around. I think that's going to be a major factor driving pipeline. And then the third, that's not going to go away, which is the search engine, where you show up. Those are the big 3, but again, the last 2 bullet points that I would say is partnership-led growth. Sometimes when I consult startups, you start there even before direct business, because direct business is so much harder to get nowadays. The cost per pipe is harder. Partnership-led growth, do not sleep on that. And then the last one, which is a sleeping target still, is you are in charge of your own pipeline. If you are a seller on this call, or you are a sales leader, your marketing team, your channel team is cookies on top of your pipeline. If you're not generating your own pipeline, you've lost. So that is still the number 1 generator of the highest close rate, is your own personal pipeline. And then,
sorry, finish up. I'm sorry.
No, keep going. Those are my top 5.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. David.
Yeah, one of the things for me, Kristen hit on a couple of very important points. The partnership-led, that's an easy, not easy, but that is, like she said, much easier than going out and doing the prospecting. For me, one of the most important things is, and again, I'm going to go right back to the beginning when I was saying, when you're asking those questions and understanding the ideal client, okay, one of the aspects is not what are they going to buy, but it's also where do they live? Where do they go for their information? And, some people say, oh, you need to make sure you have Facebook and you got Instagram, and again, big corporations, small companies, whatever it is, you have to be on social media and so on. Now, a lot of what I do, they're not going to find me on Facebook or Instagram. They're not going to find me. Quite frankly, I got a great website, okay? But people are not finding me by a Google search. That's not where my ideal client is. My ideal client primarily is going to live on LinkedIn, quite frankly. And so that's where I'm going to put my pennies. And I'm going to look at where my ideal client lives. And that's where I'm going to start focusing on where I want them to find me. Another thing Kristen said, which is absolutely key, is content is king. One of the most important things that, and I live by this, is give freely of yourself, give value, because when you're giving value, again, while I'm a technical person, I'm going on the humanistic approach here as well. And when you're giving value, that's going to endear you to people, okay? And people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And when you're giving them some, wow, that's really cool. They know some things. And I learned so much just from this conversation. And a lot of people will be like, I'm going to tell you the secrets to this when we have our next conversation. And they're holding things back. So a lot of this is understanding the people behind that, where they live. That's where you want to spend your money. And that's where you can then start to, as Ruchika said, start to do your measurements on how well this is working. And I don't even like waiting a quarter. I like looking monthly and saying, is where I'm going producing results? If not, why? Because I subscribe to the W. Edwards Deming school of fixing stuff. And that is get it fixed as early as possible in the process, because you go too far down, now you got to go back. So where do you find out about that ideal client? Where do you think they live? What are you going to do? Spend some money there and immediately start to see what's working and what's not. And then that helps you bootstrap, build, and refine any kind of AI or other type of models that you build.
This is great. It's great. Ruchika, which channels are you bullish on in 2025?
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. Like, I think I 100% agree with the community-led growth aspect of it, as well as, David's point. I really liked what he said about content and putting value out there. So I'm in complete agreement with both. And also, I noticed there was some comments on the chat with partners. So I do think, it depends on the segment that you're playing in. But like at Illumio, we are definitely very much a channel forward company. And so it is a lot of like investing in our partners, investing in our partner ecosystem, and leading with them in the forefront. So it's a bit of, it's a mixed strategy across all of those different channels. And I think, for us, the biggest thing that we're ending up focusing on is how do you have a very cohesive prospecting approach. So it's not just one, but it's a very cohesive mechanism in terms of being extremely multi-threaded, as an example, and then going to market, leveraging all of the different channels that work for you.
You actually raised a very good point in when you said the word ecosystem. We all throw around that word, and ultimately, we're cultivating a pipeline, and we're talking about our ideal client profile. What about our ideal partner profile? Because once you get an army of advocates out there, whether they're selling your service or, one would hope, I'm not exactly a good fit for you, Mr. or Ms. Client, but you know something? I know some people who are. And that's what you want to do with that ecosystem. So it's almost a multi-level pipeline, and you're looking at a pipeline and and it's a totally different measurement on the effectiveness of your, whether it's formal partnership or your friends network or whatever you want to call it, to actually magnify your reach, because you can only do so much with so many people and reach out to so many people. But once you have an army of advocates out there, that's where the growth really happens.
I think if I can add on to kind of tie it in a bow, what I think everybody has said here, I think there's one really critical piece that helps all of us revenue leaders focus our investment across all of this incredible advice, right? Which is we talked about, David talked about starting with the ideal customer profile, right? Kristen's talking about segmentation and channels. Ruchika is talking about all of the GTM and kind of all of the data that goes along with it. As you think about all of those things, what you really need to do is understand in your marketing content and your content for lead generation, how to knock down barriers systematically. So if you're starting with ideal customer profile, meet your customer in the marketing channel with the marketing message where they are at. This is not a marketing-led motion. This is not a sales-led motion. This is not a product-led motion. This is an integrated customer motion, because customers today expect us to meet them where they need to be met at the time that they need to be met, right? When I'm searching for something, when I'm trying to find a solution and I go to a website and I have to enter my email and I wait for somebody to call me and then I get the dumb pitch and I get all like, you're wasting my time, right? We need to be very, very thoughtful about how we add barriers or remove those barriers in the context of an ICP, so that we're building a marketing program that actually contributes to the funnel conversion, right? And so I'm getting very operational in what I'm talking about, but this is an incredibly important part. And then through this, the thing that nobody has said that I think is really important, spend a little bit of money on testing, right? Go spend $5,000 and test on X, Y, and Z. Don't spend a ton of money. And while David, I appreciate you said monthly, I look at things weekly, right?
Okay.
I mean, I do. I set up an ROB where I'm looking at all of the data weekly, and I have forecasts of everything that needs to happen. And I don't talk about what's going right. I talk about, I don't talk about what's going to forecast. I talk about what is deviating from what I expected, so that I have the opportunity to learn positively, or if it's below expectation, great. Is this something where we made an error? Do we need to double invest, or do we like rip the Band-Aid and do another experiment? Right.
Well, you know what? I use an analogy quite often when I speak, and that is I used to be, I'd love to do it again, doing triathlons. And I was doing one triathlon, and you swim out to a buoy, you hang a left turn, you swim up, go to the other buoy, make a left, and you wind up back at the beach, and now you move on to the bike. However, you're swimming, and this was in the ocean. And I swim, and I make my left turn, and now I'm swimming, and I say, gotta check where I am. And rather than making a left turn and going that way, I was going that way. And then I had to come back that way. So every race I ever did after that, every 10 strokes, I pick up my head and make sure where I am. So when you're saying weekly, absolutely. Course correct often.
And empower your team to look at the same metrics and empower them to dynamically course correct. Like, this isn't a leadership thing, empower.
Yes, I was just going to say that, Tiffany. Like, some of my team members are in the chat because they're like listening, because I'm like, you need to listen to David, Tiffany, and Ruchika. But I think what we're missing is, I think so many leaders that I used to report to would kind of like not include me in the discussion of why things are happening. And then you're always frantic when you have to report up to your C staff or anything about like what's going on with the business. But you should look at what's going on in the business. You should know it by heart every single week and pull your leaders in at every level of what's happening. And if they're not, it's hard to get that transparency factor and pull, exactly, Tiffany, like, how it's more of a team. It fosters good culture when you're transparent
And
in the right way.
pull leaders in, pull
Yeah.
managers in, pull PMs in,
And
who
it's
make
also
sure
teasing out the data.
somebody in that room owns that metric, and they own understanding it, and they own helping us understand why it's not going according to forecast, good or bad, right? It's a learning opportunity.
Learning.
It's not a why are we missing, because that's new. Like Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross BS. Like we need to move past all that stuff, right? It's not about why are we missing. No, it's about what did we learn, right? Because like we're all smart people. We built a forecast, we built data, we built metrics, and we anticipate something's going to happen because we've all been doing this a while. Why is it different? What do we need to learn? Right, and empower individuals.
It's teasing out that the data, because you can say at a course level, this is not working. Okay, then we have to start peeling it back and saying, why isn't it working? And something that Tiffany said just really struck a chord with me, which is, if somebody goes to your company's website or any company's website, how many times have you gone to a company's website where some search, something, it looked like something that you might want to use or something like that. And then you read their product description and you say, what the heck does it do now? Okay. And, so many times these things are written and they're not written for the people who want to understand. They're just written by some high level marketing thing that's got flashy, flowery words that is totally confusing. And guess what? People are just going to go. So you might have found your ideal client right there, and they might be there, and you're losing them right there. So by teasing out the different places where you might be losing people through that pipeline cycle is also really important.
This is great. It seems like we are all passionate about measurement, right? What are those data points that you measure? What are the KPIs that you measure? Can we double click on that a bit?
I'm gonna take a cop-out answer here, and what I'm gonna say is it depends on your business. And yes, we all look at revenue, we all look at churn, and we all look at ARR, and we all look at pipeline conversion, and we all look days to like all of those standard sales KPIs. Yes, like of course we have to measure those. But when you're looking at the data that matters, it really depends on your business. Right. And a very specific example, when I was in South Korea in the marketplace business, we looked at revenue and all of that stuff. But the data that mattered was us getting to a magical moment, right? A meaningful moment, a moment that matters. I call it a leading indicator of retention. But I focused all of my sales operations, my marketing content, self-service registration, customer service, everything that was funneling was in attribution of getting to that moment that mattered, right? And that is what I looked at literally on a daily basis, right? I didn't look at lagging indicators of retention like revenue or churn, because at that point it's way too late.
Yep.
Right. So that would be the thing for me. And I would challenge every revenue leader in this call, listening, participating. One, thank you. But two, go back and really, really understand your ICP and then measure what matters for them. And those are the primary day-to-day, week-to-week measurements that help you build a repeatable, scalable funnel.
That what you said, and there's a famous quote, and I'm not going to try because I always butcher it. But what you're saying is measure what matters. People are measuring and they're throwing out numbers, and they don't necessarily, they're not necessarily meaningful. And the other thing, I'm a huge fan of, if you're seeing churn, okay, people start jumping to conclusions and making assumptions. Mm-hmm. And like I was mentioning earlier, we need to peel back that onion saying, well, you got a lot of churn. Well, why? All right. What happened between the time they signed and now? Let's look at what we did on our side. Let's look at what they did on their side, because sorry, the performer in me, your audience always comes first. So did they have some change in business strategy? Did they just get a change in executive who doesn't like SaaS and they wanted to go to something on-prem or vice versa? And measuring what matters. And the other thing that Tiffany said, which is really key, is what are your KPIs for that? It depends. And that's what it's really got to be, because that's also what's going to make it more effective for you. So.
And the joking part, I'm going to add one more and then I'll pass it off to you, Kristen. The joking part that I say is if you're not making a business decision about it, put it in the appendix. Like, don't look at it. It's waste of space and time and energy.
Yeah, everyone has those like metrics that are the standard ones. So we don't have to talk about those. But I know Rachik and I probably are going to say something similar here. But I think when we think about like the operational things, when we're talking about churn and everything, what we did first is we actually looked at our product data, because your product data could be a really good leading indicator of what is happening with your business. And when I looked at it over year metrics, you'd be astonished at the things I learned to help reinvigorate your usage. And when your usage is going up in this sliding scale, that means your revenue will then go up thereafter. And so that is a good leading indicator of how your business is performing. Because leaders that I've worked with in the past, if you're not looking at usage, you don't know the health of your business. You don't know the health of your business. And it's such a big indicator, because those customers, and everyone talks about this. I've been reading a lot of books and also in a lot of podcasts lately. And what they're not talking about as leaders is that if you don't look at usage and you're not investing in your customers, you're always going to lose the battle, because everyone's putting emphasis on generating net new pipeline. But pipeline is more expensive than ever nowadays. To get a net new logo is more expensive. Your best advocates are your current customers and how they expand with you and how they refer your business to other people that they're friends with, which closes higher. That is what we need to look at 100%.
Yeah, and I think if I can add there, so Kristen, 100% agree with you. And, Tiffany, I think you talked about understanding your business and your customer. And I think a lot of the metrics also depends on the stage of the company that you're in, because I do think like when you're at an early stage, the KPIs and metrics that you look at are going to be vastly different when you're one of the later stage, enterprise. And that's where your entire like expansion and your install base, because at a later stage you are expecting 50 or close to 60% of your revenue coming from your existing customers. And that's when then the white space analysis, the usage of your product, and making sure that you're actually going back to your customer, looking at your account teams, hunters versus farmers, all of those decisions become extremely critical. So I do think it's a question of also where you are within your early stage, late stage. Having said that, I do think that I've always looked at measurement simply in even like 3 buckets. I just like to look at it in terms of generation, capacity, which is your cultivation, and then health. Like, we often completely miss the health and the fidelity aspect of it. And I think that's very important. It's not just about like generating it and converting. It's also about like, can you trust? It comes back to that trust conversation. Can you trust the data? Can you trust what's actually being put in there and being converted? So, I mean, those are the things that come to my mind as I think about just measurement of KPIs metrics.
That's great. So on this podcast, we have some of the well-known top 50 companies in the world, like Microsoft and IBM, and then we have mid-tier companies, and then we are. I still consider ourselves as a startup that is trying to get off the ground and be a grown-up here. I would love to start having a quick discussion around the go-to-market motions that work for the larger companies are different than the go-to-market motions that work for mid-sized company or the smaller end of the spectrum companies, right? How do you marinate these? Like, how do you put them all together to say, you know what, maybe I can steal some ideas from what Microsoft is doing for my startup, or the other way, like in Microsoft, hey, we have to be really nimble and take some of the ideas that are working for the mid-tier companies.
If you don't mind, I'll kick this one off because, you mentioned Microsoft. And I would say, flattery, like copying is a form of flattery, and flattery is one of the best things that, we all can take in circumstances like this to learn from each other, right? From my perspective, as I've worked in startups period. I've worked in startups inside of very large corporations, and then I've scaled to IPO. What I observationally have really noticed is that one of the hardest transitions is transition from really what is founder-led sales and founder-led growth to the sales organization systematically being able to drive it and drive a sales motion that really moves the company forward, right? And that's one of the trickiest in particular, because founder-led sales is incredibly valuable because that's what has gotten the company started. Like literally it has grown the company, but those initial customers probably are not your ICP. If you'd be really honest about it, right? They're probably not the right ones. And so as you go through that transition from kind of a founder-led sales motion to a scale motion, and that scale motion can be from 10 million to multiple billions, right? It's really making sure that you're revisiting what is that ICP and setting up mechanisms to learn it along the way. And then if you acquire, you make strategic decisions to acquire customers that are outside of your ICP, because that helps you build market legitimacy. It helps you build the volume that you need. It's a strategic acquisition so that you're able to like call on the next guy. Very visibly and very purposefully make those decisions, but understand that that's not the nexus and the core of a successful sales motion. So I think you have a lot of other people on the call. I would say from my observation, those are some of the kind of the top things that I would add to it.
So I'm coming from the other 800-pound gorilla, IBM. And while I do not develop the go-to-market strategy. So I'm a receiver of a lot of it. I do have some input into it. Unfortunately, I don't determine it. But a lot of it, and I know I'm sounding repetitive, but thinking about the audience first. And that is, in a go-to-market strategy, how does your intended customer want to consume what you're doing? Now, this could be an initial go-to-market strategy, like Tiffany was saying, founder-led, or when you're making pivots, pardon me. So for example, let me take some of IBM's portfolio, the AI portfolio. And IBM had bucket tons of products all over the place. And everything with hybrid cloud going on and so on, things were coalescing around containerization and so on in the technology space. And IBM had all these things, and we said, well, we make these things run in containers. Great. We run in containers. There was some go-to-market ideas. But once it started looking like people wanted these larger containers with lots of services, that's how people wanted to consume this. So it started developing these pillars. So you've got the data pillar, the data fabric pillar, the AI and machine language pillar, the automation pillar, and looking at the customers and refining. And in fact, just, it wasn't a major shift, but those pillars were even refined just last month, to refocus on the way customers are buying, the way they want to use what we are offering. So that's part of, what we were talking about with Tiffany a few minutes ago of, the weekly, monthly, whatever it is. Let's also make sure that what we are offering is the way they want to consume it by looking at the ICP and bringing those things together. So, again, putting that audience first. You can have the greatest product in the world, but if it's missing, and I mean, one last thing before I leave it to someone else. I've worked on products at IBM long time ago. Okay. IBM, I actually had a smartphone in the late 90s, years before the iPhone. All right. And it was too soon. The market wasn't ready for it. The cellular networks weren't ready for it and everything else. And IBM decided at that point to sell the IP portfolio to somebody else. And there you go. But it's got to be the right stuff at the right time for the right people, and looking at those products and the people and how they're going to consume them. That's what needs to drive the go-to-market, in addition to just, finding the data, finding the people, and finding the right pipeline.
This is great. So, David, you mentioned AI and IBM's machine learning portfolio. Mm-hmm. It's all about timing, right? AI has been in the labs for the last 20 plus years, machine learning has been in the labs.
Dude, I mentioned I worked on the Jeopardy project. 25 years ago, I was working on. I have some patents on they're expired now, but what is now the foundation of what we all know as these LLMs, the large language models. We were working on this, and no one was ready to consume it. It took PhDs to write the applications. It just wasn't consumable. So things went on, and now all of a sudden, what was old is new again.
Yeah. So I have my couple of patents. Our first patent we filed in 2008 using machine learning models to process the data. But here, specific to pipeline generation, what are you seeing AI when it comes to tools, software, the existing products like Salesforce is talking about agentic AI? Let's chat about the impact of AI that we have already seen. Is there really a promise, or still proof of concepts everywhere as far as pipeline generation specifically is concerned?
I'll start.
I'll let you guys go, because I can go for an hour on this. You guys go.
Yeah, I'll start just because from a company, RingCentral is a leader in AI business communications. So we have that suite of products. So I kind of know a little bit about that from a pipeline perspective. I will say, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's going to have agents, right? So I don't even want to talk about agents right now, because that's going to be the norm moving forward, is how quickly can you get a reply, have it be accurate, an answer, and actually work through you and work through your day-to-day. That's going to become a norm. I think when you look at pipeline generation, there's so many go-to-market tools, and my sales leader, Jordan, I guarantee he's going to comment in the chat his favorite tools that we are testing out and iterating on every day. I think there's a lot of AI tools in go-to-market right now that are very niche solutions, and they're going to find their footprint and their footing of like, what are they solving for? Is this going to be a niche, or is this going to be more of like a platform play that can be integrated into your go-to-market strategy on CRM? But I think if you are a go-to-market team member on this call and not using AI in your day-to-day, that is the concern. It's not that AI is going to replace you. It's that people are going to replace you that know how to work faster and better using AI. So like my sellers and my sales leader, they use it every day, whether it's ChatGPT to help with emails personalizations. We're trying out Lavender. There's other tools such as Tofu that repurpose content from a marketing perspective to make you faster, Jasper AI, all of these tool sets that are coming into our workforce. Try them out. Most of them have a free trial, and how you can input your data and personalize your message based off of years of, there's a customer that as, you potentially lost years ago. It can actually look through your CRM, figure out why you lost it. And if you came out with a feature that is literally something you came out with, you can personalize that note versus looking back at the whole Salesforce. There's so many tools out there. And I think we all, as a go-to-market engine for pipeline gen, need to embrace it, because that it's going to be replaced by people who know how to work faster with AI alongside them. And that's kind of the main point that I want to make. I know, Ruchika, we talked about this. I don't know if you have a point.
100%. I'm in agreement. And in fact, I wrote an article as well, on LinkedIn for like 4 steps to get started. And then, Kristen, one of my steps was just go and look at your current tech stack, like start there, because pretty much every single platform out there that we're using right now that you have a subscription to, like we've got a lot through our, entire tech stack, right? From like prospecting all the way to like customer success. They're all adding AI capabilities to their platform. So it's a question of, drilling down into that, understanding the capability, and at least trying it out. Having said that, I was reading an article which actually said 2022 was like the year of launch. 2023 was the year of curiosity. 2024 was the year of like experimentation. And this year is supposed to be the year of adoption. So we absolutely have to, get on the bandwagon and, like as Kristen said, start looking at some of and there are a lot of efficiency gains coming out. There's some very easy wins with respect to just the messaging, content creation, personalization. I know we're POCing a platform today that actually brings inbound and outbound together and really helps with some of the personalization, the value messaging, so that we get prospecting out to even our AEs. So there's a lot that one can really delve into. Now we'll have to, cross our fingers to make sure that we're actually able to convert some of these POCs and bring them into our day-to-day motions.
I will add one thing, and I know David has a lot of experience in this space as well. I think the thing that I would add that's a little bit different, just supporting what Kristen and everyone else is saying, is the importance for data, right? Mm-hmm. And I know I'm reading your mind, David. I'm reading your mind, and I was laughing about your mobile device because I used to work at BlackBerry, and I'm like, oh, there's another idea that.
Yeah. I thought I was the mind reader. That's exactly what I was going to say.
But yeah, so data and working to increase the speed by which your business's organizational data is democratized, freely available, and consumable. Right. And so this is working across business platforms that are able to unify, and Microsoft has those, obviously. There are other startups in this space that are taking different types of approaches, like Syncari. Does everybody remember when Tableau was first coming to market and how transformative that was for marketing? Like, there is going to be a similar type of revolution for data. And if your data and engineering teams are not investing in that space, it will significantly limit sales, marketing, and go-to-market's ability to be agile quickly. So that's the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, and that's also going back to one of the other comments that we were talking about. That's where you figure out, where your pennies are. And if you start to see through some of these data models, what's working and what's not. Okay, great. That's working. That's not. Now what? And you can start slicing and dicing that, narrow that down in a funnel kind of way, and then with what Kristen was saying, use that to make even more effective use of the resource and the people that you're paying. So we have tons of data. I do this every day, from manufacturing to human resources. The data's out there. People are gathering data, but people are not sure yet how to use it, and that's what we have to do. And that's how you can, augment that with AI and cultivate a pipeline.
No, great point. Just a fine point on the data on both ends, right? To do the analysis, that's after the fact, but you need clean, complete, up-to-date data and intelligence to even start your ICP analysis and start your pipeline generation through multiple channels. Folks, I really enjoyed this. I know we have couple of questions. Do we have time for a questions or two? I know there are a lot of questions that are popping up here. Let's take one or two questions here, and then the rest, we'll post it on LinkedIn. So Ruchika, I think this is a question for you. Any AI pipeline gen success stories that you can share?
So we are, we're currently leveraging AI across all of our platforms. So we have SalesLoft for prospecting, where we're making sure that we leverage their capabilities. Kristen already mentioned Lavender, so we're doing a POC with Lavender on messaging. We use 6 Sense as well, which is actually ending up getting a lot of that content creation and personalization through that. So across our entire tech stack, and then we're also doing a POC, like I mentioned, with another platform that brings together both outbounding and inbounding. It's still very early stage, so I don't want to throw names out there, but more to come. But clearly there's a lot that we're doing across the entire, prospecting steps, as well as the go-to-market tech stack.
Got it. So the use cases are right now in the context of pipeline generation. Personalization is a big one, right?
Yeah.
We are bringing ICP Intel. Spoiler alert here. So pretty soon you'll be able to use AI and define your ICP, and then measurements, right? What am I missing? Is there any other use case within the pipeline generation tool that you're experimenting, or you wish there was one?
I think that sums it up. It is about the whole, the personalization, the value messaging, and making sure that we're actually addressing, the entire inflow of inbound leads as well as outbound.
I would love to have end of the year AI work on all the data and say, here are the 3 top go-to-market channels from my 100 podcasts, just to wrap this thing up, 100 podcasts last year, community, events, and partnerships. Those are the 3 top channels that go-to-market leaders have picked. We'll find out in 2025. But and we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much. This was an amazing panel here. It was my honor to host 4 of you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have
guys.
a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks
Manoj.
for joining
Thanks,
us.
everybody.